Hello. My name is L.A.V. I am a writer of an up-and-coming book, Figment on Layer 1. And I'm here today to talk about one of my favorite books, in which I never finished, like most things. This book is called Titus Grown. Now, Titus Grown is the Gormenghast trilogy, and the way that I know about it is the miniseries adaptation, and that made me really love the trilogy, the miniseries. So that's where I learned about it, and I've always wanted to read the book. And so probably about 7 months ago, I ordered the book, Titus Grown, and I never finished it. And when I say I never finished it, I'm not saying I DNF'd it. You know, people usually use the term DNF when a book is boring. I keep on going back to it, but I can't ever really seem to finish it. It's not because it's bad. I really love this book. I love the writing of this book. But I don't know. It's just hard, I guess. This book, it takes place in a gothic fantasy setting, which is sort of Renaissance and medieval without a lot of medieval aspects. It's really hard to describe. And the book is way weirder to imagine. The reason that I can imagine it is because I had watched the miniseries. But I saw those movies, or that show, quite a long time ago. We're going to talk about about 86 or 84 pages in which I read of this book, because there's a lot to go through in those 84 pages. In the things in which I've read, there is a lot to go through, and a lot in which I like about the book, a lot in which I don't like, but also just cool little aspects. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, so I literally right here end up eating an entire grapefruit, or at least most of it, for no real reason. I don't know why I thought this was a good idea. That's what I end up doing.
Sorry, I haven't eaten breakfast. This is my breakfast. I think I'm ready. So, the first thing in which I would like to talk about is what the book says on the back. Now, when I first got the book, I had read a little bit of a PDF online that sort of piqued my interest. There were drawings in that PDF, and this book has some illustrations in it. Mine does as well. The illustrations in this book are good. They're good, but they're few, and it's not like it's too crowded, and it's not like they give a clear enough picture to the point where it takes the imagination out of it. It's pretty. I like the drawings. But I really want to, as the first thing in which we talk about, I want to talk about what exactly they say on the back of this book. An undisputed classic of epic fantasy. I would agree. This is a classic, and this is one of the few books in which has come out, and it's not modern day, but it was I don't know exactly when this came out. I imagine it was around the same time that Lord of the Rings comes out, because quote on here is, many readers admire Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, but fans of Mervyn Peake's Titus trilogy maintain that this extravagant epic about a labyrinth castle populated with conniving Dickinson grotesques is the true fantasy classic of our time. They compared this book to Lord of the Rings. No, nothing about this book can be compared to Lord of the Rings. Mainly because this book, in some aspects, takes from real things, I'll say. However, when it comes to Lord of the Rings, that was a very distinctive book with imaginative writings that almost everything in that book is like things in which at that time was never real. You couldn't really visualize it. You'd have to have a wild imagination. It was things in which had never been thought of at the time. I wouldn't say that this really was thought of either when it comes to the aspects of it, especially if this book was made in the 40s or 50s. But I would say definitely not comparable to Lord of the Rings whatsoever. I love this book, and I love Mervyn Peake's writing way more than I love Tolkien's writing, because I've tried on several occasions to read Tolkien, and it gets very complicated very fast. So I have a little bit. I do plan on How long has that been down there? Sorry. That's right, I never clipped it back on. Ha 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 ha. Alright, so. Did we talk about the back of the book yet? I'm just gonna reiterate. This book is very Shakespearean in plot. Sometimes in the way that they dress and the way that things sort of appear, but I would just say it's mostly in the story. They don't talk Shakespearean, so you don't have to worry about that, but they do talk weirdly. And this book has one of the best dialogues for the characters that I have seen. You can read the character, and you automatically know who's talking. To Rotkod, it signified a complete lack of understanding, and it annoyed him that the man should invade his province. "Curator," said Flay, after a ghastly silence, "I will tell you something. I know something, eh?" "Well," said Rotkod. "I'll tell you," said Flay. "But first, what day is it? What month? And what year? Answer me." Now, Mr. Flay has a sort of dialogue where he'll say things, and they talk about it later in the book, from what I got to when he talks to Steerpike. He talks in a manner in which is only understandable to himself. In other words, he'll say things in a way and word it in a way in which, like, okay, so imagine you went to the store and you were supposed to be getting things off of a list, and you come back and Mr. Flay's there. He would say something like, "The food?" And you wouldn't know what you're being asked. Did you get the food? Did you make the food? You just got back. What? But he just will say, "The food," and he'll repeat it over and over again, unless you say, like, "I don't understand what you're saying." Then he'll reword it as, "Is the food? What was the food?" He'll say something that really only makes sense to him, and it'll usually be like, "Oh yeah, he wants you to make the food," or he wants to know if you had the food. But frankly, the way that he words it, you can't understand him. And that's what a lot of the characters in this book talk like. But it's to a very different degree. His is just talking, trying to eliminate as much words as possible to get to quicker sentences. So he won't ask, "Where is the food?" No, he'll ask, "The food?" and he was the first distinctive character that I saw. Ratcod was somewhat distinctive, but I would say that was only really because he was talking to Mr. Flay in this scene. And then the Great Kitchen happens, which in the Great Kitchen, this is one of the most memorable scenes that I recall from the mini-series. Another thing in which I really love about this book is the fact that the chapters are short, because you feel accomplished after you read like 4 or 5 pages. Like this page right here, The Great Kitchen, it starts halfway down on page 17, and then it ends literally almost at the top of page 22. So it's what, like 5 pages? Pretty good. Unfortunately, when I wrote my book, I wrote the chapters to be like 16 to 15 pages, sometimes longer. But I think that just serves as the sort of style that this is. This is very fast-paced, a lot of things going on, like a lot of frantic behavior, while in the book in which I wrote, it's very slow-paced. It's a slow burn, I would say. Figment on layer 1. What happens in the Great Kitchen, they just sort of talk about the great slabs of stone. The faces of the gray scrubbers had become like slabs themselves. There was no expression whatsoever upon the 18 faces, unless the lack of expression is in itself an expression. They were traditionally deaf. Their eyes were there, small and flat as coins, and the color of the walls themselves, as though during the long hours of professional staring, the gray stone had at last reflected itself indelibly once and for all. Yes, and this book has like the most insane word choices. I'll just name a couple in which I found in the 84 pages. I'm sure that I missed some. Perspiration, which was a word that I heard before, so I wouldn't really say that it's a big word throughout the book, and I sometimes use the word. Rizzles or rizzoles. I had looked this up, and I believe it's talking about the way that they walk. There's some simian, piecemeal, royster, psychophanic, fervour. This word looks like chorizo, but I know it's not. It's big words that I don't understand. And I meant to look up a lot of these, but I never got around to it. I think I did. I looked up rizzles because they use rizzles. It's spelled R-I-S-S-O-L-E-S, if you know what that means. They use this word probably the most compared to any other word that was on there. And so I had to look it up because they were using it to the point where I was like, what the hell are they talking about? So, yeah, the Great Kitchen is just what it sounds like. It's basically the royal kitchen where all the meals get prepared, which, I mean, they have gray scrubbers in which scrub the stone, the floors, and they're supposed to keep the workplace clean for the food, but honestly, I'm not sure if I would eat any of this food because everyone in there seems like they are disgusting and they're probably perspiring all over their food in which they make, yeah. So, why do I say this? Because the head chef is Swelter. Fuck. Swelter is, in the miniseries, I forget the actor's name, but if you've seen the Harry Potter movies, he was Harry Potter's uncle, and he played Swelter in the miniseries. That's one of the reasons that I remember it. Mr. Flay is played by Christopher Reeves, you fucking. Mr. Flay is played by Christopher Lee, which was Saruman and quite a lot of other people. He was also Willy Wonka's father, Lollipops. But yeah, why do I say that Swelter is probably sweating all over the food? Well, let's flip to a Swelter line. Okay, right here. The apprentices edged themselves forward. The apprentices, of course, being the sort of people in which Swelter is training to, I guess, succeed him. Once that he dies, there has to be someone else to take his place. So he has apprentices which literally worship the ground that he stands on. The apprentices edge themselves forward, tripping and treading upon each other's feet, the foremost of them being wedged against the wine barrel itself. "That's the way! That's just the way!" said Swelter, leering down at them. "Now we're quite a happy little family. Most select advance." This dude is definitely spitting all over the food when he talks. Like, I'll give it to Mervyn Peake. This is one of my favorite voices in the book because it's like it's not even hard to read. Like when he says like that, he just adds an sh at the end. I don't think the birds like Swelter. And that's why him and Mr. Flay kind of hate each other. Flay is like this slender and sort of, I guess, pompous kind of dude. He's very like Royal Select. Wow. Swelter, he lives in this great kitchen in which he sees as a sort of pit, a cesspool, and he views himself probably the way that everyone sees him. Okay. He views himself as, besides that, I would say I would not want this dude cooking for me. Yes, and Steerpike is one of his apprentices. Steerpike in the miniseries, of course, being a very memorable character. I forget the actor's name, but he is one of my favorite actors. He did an amazing job, and I can't not imagine him as Steerpike. For a little bit, I couldn't remember the name of Steerpike when I was reading the book, and I thought that character was Mr. Flay. And from what I remember in the miniseries, Steerpike is the best character. If anything, Steerpike is the main character. He also probably is the antagonist, but I don't think that I mind. The heir to Lord Sepultrath is born, and immediately every character just talks about the way that this baby looks. He was born, and apparently he is one of the most ugliest babies around. But of course, from the book, everyone is so weird and nasty looking. They are usually people so big and or so bony and so gaunt that they don't really look all that great themselves. So imagine what a baby would look like, in which they think is ugly. But I remember what happened in the story. So a little bit of a spoiler, because I remember that Titus Crone is the only person that kind of looks normal. And I mean, Steerpike in the movie looked normal, and that's another thing that I have a little problem now that I've read the book in the miniseries. They describe Fuchsia, which is Lord Sepultrath's daughter, to having a face in which, if it was slightly shifted, she could have been beautiful. But mostly she's ugly of face. I think they put it that way exactly, or he puts it that way exactly. And in the movie, or the miniseries, the one thing that I can remember, and which was true to Fuchsia's character, appearance-wise, with just having really long and tangled hair that dragged on the floor. But yes, so they have this daughter. Lord Sepulchre has this daughter. And this was actually funny. So she basically starts hearing rumors, the daughter, Fuchsia, that she has a brother. And she's like, oh, Father, please tell me that this isn't true. I don't want a brother. And Lord Sepulchre is like, yeah, well, you have to deal with it. He was born yesterday, so just kind of deal with it. The world isn't about you. All well. Which, that kind of implies that the mother was so obese that she did not even know that she was pregnant. Or if she did know, no one else knew. Well, I still haven't gotten to where Fuchsia meets Steerpike, but the only thing that I can really tell, which is, it kind of bothers me now, and I'm not sure how much it did when I had watched the miniseries, was that Fuchsia is just as whiny as she is in the book. Everything is about her, and the world is cruel, which, I mean, this world is freaking cruel, holy crap. But, you know, she kind of looks like an adult in the mini-series, and in here, she's 14, so it's understandable that she's a little bit whiny, but there, like, she just looks like an adult. Like, it's really hard now thinking about it that she was supposed to be a younger character. And so I think I talked about this a little, but there are parts in this book in which is dated. And I'd say the part in which is dated is the christening. The christening. They have that in this book. And I realized what time this book came out. It came out in a time where that sort of thing was not only normal, but it was also a thing in which was seen as holy, and these people see as holy. And I would say that's the only dated part about the book that I've read so far. But now that we've talked a little bit about the plot, let's talk about the writing aspects. Now, I've said the character aspects are pretty good and pretty well handled, especially in their voices. One of my favorite lines from Mr. Flay, let me see where, right here. This is one of my favorite parts in the book. So basically, this scene has to do with Steerpike. He left the great kitchen where he's supposed to stay, and he followed Mr. Flay out, which he kind of sort of snuck out. He saw the way that he sort of turned in, like he was just so quick. He took no time in moving to places, even though that this is sort of Steerpike's first time out of the great kitchen, and like all the narrowing hallways, it's like hard to move around because he doesn't know it. And they even say on the back of the book that they kind of call this castle a little bit of a labyrinth because it has so many twists and turning passageways. But basically, he follows Mr. Flay, and then as he turns one corner, he bumps into Flay because Flay figured out that he was being followed. They start talking to each other. "Where am I?" Steerpike said in a whisper. "Where am I?" "One of Swelter's little rats," thought Flay to himself, taking no notice of the question. "One of Swelter's, eh? One of his stripped rats? Get up," said Mr. Flay aloud. "What you doing here?" See? He's doing it again. He's doing the thing. He's hardly saying a complete sentence, but in some ways understand it. What you doing here? And he put the candle close to the boy's face. I don't know where I am, said young Steer Pike. I'm lost here. Lost. Give me daylight. What you doing here, I said. What you doing here, said Flay. I don't want Swelter's boys here. Curse them. I don't want to be here. Give me daylight and I'll go away. Far away. Away? Where? Steer Pike had recovered control of his mind, although he still felt hot and desperately tired. He had noticed the sneer in Mr. Flay's voice as he had said, I don't want Swelter's boys here, and so at Mr. Flay's question, away where? Steer Pike answered quickly, oh, anywhere from that dreadful Mr. Swelter. Flay peered at him for a moment or two, opening his mouth several times to speak, only to close it again. New? Said Flay, looking expressionlessly through the boy. Me? Said young Steer Pike. You, said Flay, still looking clean through the top of the boy's head. New? 17 years old, sir, said young Steer Pike, but new to that kitchen. When? Said Flay, who left out most of every sentence. Steer Pike, who seemed able to interpret this sort of shorthand talk, answered, Last month. I want to leave that dreadful Swelter, he added, replaying his only possible card and glancing up at the candlehead. Lost, were you? Said Flay after a pause, but perhaps less darkness in his tone. Lost in the stone lanes, were you? One of Swelter's little rats. Lost in the stone lanes, eh? And Mr. Flay raised his gaunt shoulders again. Though he was new in the kitchen, but he does not know the turning lanes or the other areas. The gray scrubbers, I'm pretty sure they're only allowed to walk in the kitchen area and scrub the kitchen area, and the apprentices can only go where Swelter goes. Steer Pike is kind of a rebel, you know, he doesn't want to be there. He sees Swelter for this disgusting slob, and he kind of looks down on everyone, and that's why he wanted to leave. So he was new to the kitchen, and I'm not even sure where he came from, though. There are people who aren't as wealthy outside of the walls, but those people are sort of seen as like savages or barbarians, and he's not that character. So I'm just not sure where he came from, because the subjects below the kingdom, they're not really normal people. They all just sort of serve the Lord Sepulchre. So I'm really not so sure on who Steer Pike is. It is a very weird writing style. And the illustrations were done by Mervyn Peake as well. That's pretty cool. There's just a lot of sentences in this book in which are kind of awkward because they continuously go. But I don't dislike it. I actually like it. I actually think that it's kind of interesting. You don't see that in a lot of books. And because they don't focus a lot on... Since he doesn't focus a lot on... you know, a lot of periods or a lot of normal sentence structures of just commas or colons. Instead, he'll just continuously go, and it's more fast going, and I like that. I like that writing style, even though it is kind of weird to get used to at first. The book is very weird, very it's nothing like I had read before I had read this book, and I very much so like it, and I think that it is a wonderful book, and I think that you should probably go look at it if any of the ideas I posed sort of pique your interest, I guess. I do plan on finishing this book, but I've had it for like so many months and I have not finished it. And it's not because I can't finish a book, even though I don't have a really good track record with finishing a book. This book actually interests me. It's just I have a lot of writing of my own to do. I don't want to be influenced by other books while I'm writing. I think that's all I really had to say on Titus Grown.